The 2016 iPhone 7 on paper seems to offer a lot of bang for your buck, boasting things like 4K video recording and pretty decent performance for under $120 USD. And with plenty of people still using the iPhone 7 in 2023, it seems like there's nothing to hate. However, there is one fatal flaw preventing it from being the ultimate budget smartphone. But just how bad is it? And could it possibly be looked past? Well, let's find out, starting with the design. And by the way, this review will be centered around just the smaller iPhone 7, but if any point there is a difference, I will point it out, and timestamps, as always, are in the description below. So starting off with the design, it's pretty much all too familiar at this point with the iconic home button and bezels, and it's not hard to confuse it with the iPhone 6, 6S, 8, and 2nd and 3rd generation SE. I will say though, this incredibly sleek matte black color definitely stands out. This has got to be one of the most aesthetically appealing iPhone color options of all time. But the best thing about this classic iPhone design is its feel in the hand. It's so thin and light compared to the flagships of 2023, and I like to call this the perfect smartphone size. Not so big that you can't reach all four corners of the screen with one hand, but also not too small that it's hard to use. Plus, it's also really thin and light, at 7.1mm thick and weighing 138 grams, so your hand will never get tired while holding it, and it's barely noticeable in your pocket. For the larger iPhone 7 Plus, that's a bit of a different story. It's still thin and somewhat light, but it's a lot more cumbersome to carry around and use with one hand. Now, the matte black texture in particular can be quite slippery if you're not using a case, and plus the metal means no wireless charging, but then on the other hand, you don't get any fingerprints or marks on the back like you do with shiny glass. Now, the home button on the front is getting increasingly rare nowadays, apart from the 2022 iPhone SE of course, but it is quite a nostalgia hit when you use it to unlock your phone and to exit apps. And that's why the iPhone SE still has it, for those who do prefer having the home button since it's what they're used to. The home button on here is packing 2nd generation Touch ID, so unlocking the phone with your fingerprint is pretty much instant, and you only really have to give it a light brush pass to be recognized, which is nice. Oh, and this was also the first iPhone to introduce the haptic home button, meaning that it's not actually a physical button on here, but rather a pressure-sensitive surface that vibrates when it detects a press, and it's actually really convincing. It does feel like you're pressing an actual button. The bezels, however, many will agree are not so nice in a world of 6-inch all-screen panels, and yeah, even for 2016, they were starting to get a bit long in the tooth. But I guess the two benefits are that you can use them to hold the phone while in landscape, and you've also got that 16:9 aspect ratio, so most YouTube videos will fill the entire screen, unlike on all-screen phones where you get those black bars either side. Just looks a bit unclean. Now on the bottom we get our speakers and lightning port, no headphone jack anymore. In fact, this was also the first iPhone to very controversially kill it off to make way for Bluetooth headphones, a move which, if you remember, was received with a fireball of hatred back in 2016, but it turns out that nowadays that actually paid off pretty well, even if they may or may not have released their $160 wireless AirPods a few minutes later. Coincidence? Maybe. Now, the speakers on the bottom aren't the best in terms of sound quality, but this was also the first iPhone to have a stereo setup, utilizing the earpiece as well for a much more immersive sound, something we also see on pretty much every new phone nowadays, so nice to have it on here as well. Now, unfortunately, as I said before, the back of the iPhone 7 doesn't support wireless charging since it's made of metal. That wouldn't come until the following year with the iPhone 8 and 10. Although we do get IP67 water resistance, yet another thing that the iPhone 7 brought to the iPhone for the first time. So yeah, the design is nothing we haven't seen before. It's definitely far from the most modern looking device out there, but the matte black of course looks pretty darn good. Now coming back to the front of the iPhone 7, we have our 4.7-inch display. Like the design, it's a decent display that does the job. The quality is good enough for most people, but it's also nothing to wow at. With a resolution of 1334 by 750 and pixel density of 326 pixels per inch, it's not the largest or absolute sharpest panel out there. In fact, it's actually below Full HD at around just 720p, so on paper, it's actually pretty mediocre, but it's quite a bit better in real-world use. You can't see individual pixels from a normal viewing distance, so everything looks sharp and pixel-free enough. And with a peak brightness of 705 nits, you can still see what you're doing to an extent when you're out in the sun. But despite it being good enough, it is missing a few modern non-necessities. Like for example, OLED technology, it's just LCD, so you're not getting those deep true blacks. And with a refresh rate of only 60Hz, it's a lot less buttery smooth than on modern flagships with 90, 120, or even 144Hz displays. Now of course, these two things are nowhere near essential features. The average person is pretty much guaranteed to not even notice or care for that matter, but the lack of these features does show the phone's age. Although to be fair, it was 2016, they probably could have put an OLED display on there if they wanted to. Now the larger 7 Plus has a much larger and sharper panel, being a full 1080p at 5.5 inches, but still only 60Hz and LCD. The only genuine complaint that the average non-techie person might have is of course the size of the smaller 7's display. especially taking into account those huge bezels, so it's not the ideal phone for consuming content, but in general, it still provides a decent enough viewing experience. But just before we move on to the camera setup of the iPhone 7, I've got to tell you about this amazing new product from today's video partner, Mini Soparu. With USB-A and HDMI ports rapidly disappearing off modern laptops, while plenty of USB-A and HDMI devices are still in circulation, their new 13-in-1 docking station is the key to your dream seamless setup without costing a kidney. Forget about your numerous USB-C dongles and adapters, this all-in-one docking port gives you the freedom we once had in 2015. Whether you're looking to connect your laptop to up to 3 displays, charge multiple devices at once, or extract data from multiple hard drives, the Mini Soparu 13-in-1 leaves no setup unfathomable, especially since the M1 and M2 13-inch MacBook Pros that only come with USB-C ports are only limited to 2 displays externally by themselves, but 3 with the Mini Soparu docking station. Plus, with its sleek, durable, and portable design and super fast data transfer speeds, it's built to take on whatever you throw at it, whether you're on Mac, Windows, or even Chrome OS. So if you're ready to finally declutter your desk setup, head to the links in the description below to purchase directly from Mini Soparu or via Amazon. And thank you so much again to Mini Soparu for partnering with me for this video. And now let's take a look at the iPhone 7's cameras. How are they holding up as of now? Well, on the rear, there's a single 12 megapixel main lens and a 7 megapixel selfie camera on the front. And then the 7 Plus added a 12 megapixel telephoto camera capable of 2x zoom. Like the design and display, the main camera is really nothing to write home about. I mean, sure, it does the job and will capture your memories just fine, and with the right lighting conditions, sometimes you can actually produce some rather stunning results. But we have come quite a long way since, both in terms of the actual photo quality and camera features. Colors are still pretty good though, and because the iPhone 7 was the first non-plus sized iPhone to introduce optical image stabilization, something that's guaranteed to be on 99% of phones today, taking a blur-free shot is a lot easier than on previous iPhones like the 6S and the 6. But of course, like all of these older phones, the actual size of the lens is quite small, meaning that it can't let in as much light as the shooters on modern handsets. If you're indoors and it's kinda dark, you're definitely going to get grain and blur to some degree. Plus, as you'd expect, we're missing quite a few modern knickknacks like night mode or portrait mode, although you will find a very primitive version of portrait mode on the 7 Plus. Back in 2016, they didn't have the software to be able to pull it off without that second telephoto lens. But again, this camera is not completely ancient, you can still pull off some pretty darn good shots, and it genuinely does work fine for someone like a grandparent or someone who doesn't care about all the gizmos and just wants to capture memories. Now with the selfie camera, it's not the most world-class bit of kit anymore. In fact, it was actually pretty average for 2016. If you zoom in, you're definitely going to see some grain, and colors and dynamic range are significantly worse than the main camera, but again, for someone like a kid or grandparent who just wants to take a selfie, nothing more, nothing less, you can't really knock it. Now video, impressively for its time, can be shot in up to 4K at 30 frames per second, and it's really a lot better than you might think. Again, stabilization is a lot better than it was before the 7, so filming moving objects like pets or cars is a lot easier, and the dynamic range and colors actually hold up pretty decently. I mean, no, it's not going to be at all impressive when you compare it to phones nowadays that are worlds better in terms of quality and pack countless more features, but if all you're looking for is to capture memories, you really can't complain. Something else you can't really complain about on here is the performance. On here we get the Apple A10 chipset and 2GB of RAM, although on the 7 Plus there's 3GB of RAM. And the iPhone 7 is much more capable than you might think thanks to Apple's terrific software optimization for their older devices. Basic stuff like scrolling Instagram, watching YouTube, texting, setting alarms, or simply navigating through the interface is actually really pleasant. You don't really get any stuttering or delays very often, and even most games, provided that they're not super intensive, can actually still be run pretty well. Although things like Pixel Gun 3D or extremely heavy Roblox games can be pretty rough and result in the phone heating up enough to fry an egg on it. But that's pretty understandable considering its age. I mean, let's be real, it's not even going to come close to even coming close to the processing power of, say, the iPhone 15 Pros or Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultras, or even something a bit older like the iPhone 11 Pro. If you compare side by side, there will be maybe a few seconds delay when opening apps, for example, and of course, those newer phones will handle intensive and everyday activity much better and without heating up as much, but you know, for normal, light to moderate everyday use, performance is actually still really good on here. Over the past few years, Apple has been really terrific at maximizing the performance for their older devices through software optimization, and the iPhone 7 is a great example of this. They're no longer slowing down their older devices like they did a few years ago. Nowadays, they're actually trying to maximize their lifespans, which is a huge turnaround. Unfortunately though, I did say that there was one fatal flaw, so I hate to spoil the party, but might as well get it out of the way now. now. They say all good things must come to an end, and the iPhone 7 is no exception in our world of rapidly evolving mobile tech. The phone was cut off from receiving any further software updates in the September of 2022 with the launch of iOS 16, ending its 6 years of support and leaving it stuck on iOS 15 forever. What this means is that basically as the years roll on, less and less apps will be supported, and so the phone's functionality is basically on a slow decline. For now though, you should still be able to download most apps and still use the phone as you would normally, but over the next couple of years, certain features and apps, for example, will stop working, and the apps on their latest compatible versions will slowly but surely get more obsolete and dysfunctional as time goes on. And plus, being stuck on an older version of software means that you're not going to get new features that come with further updates. For example, the iPhone 7 missed out on custom lock screens and the new notification design that came with iOS 16. I mean, it's really a shame considering that everything else about the phone holds up so well. The display is good, the cameras can still produce stunning results in the right conditions, and the performance will carry you through most things hiccup-free. And a lot of people say the iPhone 7 was cut off too soon, and I somewhat agree with that, but at the same time, there is a good chance that another update might have slowed it down significantly to the point of being unpleasant to use. I mean, to be fair, you can only do so much with 2GB of RAM in 2023. So in a way, it's a good thing that they cut it off, but at the same time, it does mean that the longevity suffers, and people will be eventually forced to upgrade. Although with that being said, 6 years is a darn long time for a phone to be supported, definitely longer than any Android phone up until this point, excluding of course the new Pixel 8 with its 7 years of guaranteed updates, but the iPhone 7 has had a pretty darn good run, and as I said, you should still be able to get good use out of it for maybe another 1 to 2 years before you start running into compatibility issues. But basically, what this all comes down to is that the lack of future updates makes the phone no longer worth buying anymore. And finally, I hate to end this review on a bad note, but the battery life on here really leaves me no choice. The iPhone 7 never had a massive battery to begin with. Combined with the batteries in most handsets having years to degrade, the iPhone 7 is left with a pretty dodgy 1 to 3 hours of normal use on a charge. Now yes, of course, a battery replacement would definitely improve things and maybe get you a couple of more hours of screen on time, but with battery replacements costing as much or even more than the phone itself, it's definitely a losing bet. I mean, if all you use your phone for is texting, calling, and taking photos, there is a good chance it'll pull through, especially if your battery health is higher than 90%, but you know, you're much better off getting something newer that will last a lot longer, both in terms of battery life and again, software support. And so with everything about the iPhone 7 now covered, it's pretty clear that while most aspects still hold up pretty good, the lack of future software support and painfully bad battery life get in the way of it being a worthwhile purchase. Even though you can find them for around $100 USD on the used and refurbished market, you're just much better off putting your money towards something newer and better. And even if you're on a budget, the iPhone XR, for example, can easily be bought for under $200 and a second-gen iPhone SE less than $150. Now, if you have an old iPhone 7 lying around just doing nothing, it could be a decent backup phone, or maybe for a kid's first phone, or even a grandparent who only wants it for texting and calling. If you're still using an iPhone 7 as your daily driver, now is a good time to upgrade, but then at the same time, if it's still doing everything you need it to, it's not really urgent at the moment, but I would definitely consider upgrading within probably the next year. And again, if you were considering buying one, definitely put your money towards something better that will give you a longer run. But in the iPhone 7's defense, it was a pretty darn revolutionary device back in its day, and it introduced quite a few features we're accustomed to nowadays, like water resistance and portrait mode on the iPhone 7 Plus, and anyone who bought one back in 2016 definitely got a good run for their money with the 6 years of updates. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, please make sure you drop me a like and subscribe to TechSpree for more reviews, insights, and the occasional unboxing. Also, if you'd like to have a stalk, my Instagram is at tech_spree and my Twitter, or X, is at techspree1. Thank you so much for watching. This is Tom with TechSpree, and I'll see you as always next time.